My sister-in-law asked for a house key, but I refused, so it disappeared. When I went to her apartment to retrieve it, I discovered something startling. I recently married my 27-year-old boyfriend of 6 years, and although COVID has somewhat hampered our careers, we are working things out together. My husband isn't very close to his family, though he has never explained why. But from what I've gathered, he and my sister-in-law have some problems, and these worries forced the in-laws to take sides. After these incidents, I noticed that my spouse had become quiet, melancholy, and depressed. When we tried to talk about it, he never really opened up. Instead, he just told me that he wished he had a better family. My spouse hasn't been close to them since they sided with my sister-in-law, but to be honest, it didn't bother me too much because I come from a large family, and he was regularly invited to our family gatherings. When I offered to get in touch with his family on his behalf, he said he would rather not do anything yet and that there would be a better time, but I didn't know when that would be. At one point, I was positive it would happen at our wedding, but we were married in a small ceremony that was only attended by our closest friends and family. He hadn't invited anyone from his side. Nevertheless, I did get to meet his parents and my sister-in-law during that time. His parents and sister tried to enter the location while our wedding ceremony was taking place, something my husband had explicitly warned them not to do. When they managed to do so, they made a big deal out of it, accusing my husband of being the bad guy for never answering calls, taking messages, or visiting my mother-in-law during her cancer battle. My husband firmly told them to leave, saying they were not welcome, and my sister-in-law watched everything unfold from the corner. When we were on our way to our honeymoon, I got a friend request notification on my phone from my sister-in-law. It seemed strange, but I didn't mind because we were family, so I added her and soon forgot about it. When our eyes met, she gave me a small shrug as if to say, "What else are we supposed to do?" After they were booted out, the wedding went off without a hitch, and we were happy to get married despite the odds. When my sister-in-law returned to my life, she messaged me to say that she knew I came from a large family and that I understood the value of family, something she said my husband did not. She also thanked me for helping to bring the family back together and went into detail about how my husband could be a little juvenile, but that if we worked together, we could quickly fix everything. I was gullible and believed her, so we started talking more, or I couldn't completely avoid her because I worked from home and had health issues, so she even came over to our house once or twice while my husband was away. On one of these occasions, my sister-in-law asked for a copy of the house keys, which was strange. When I asked why she wanted them, she said she was worried about me because I was at home working all day. She added that if something happened to me while my husband was away, having Amy's sister-in-law didn't seem happy with my refusal. She abruptly ended the conversation and left, though she was smiling, which didn't reach her eyes, which worried me even more. I'd understood her argument in the context of a medical emergency, but something about her request seemed strange, and her statements made me uneasy. I couldn't understand why I gently declined and promised her that I would call my husband if anything happened. When she finally left after staying for tea, I was on high alert the entire time she was there. I was relieved, but not for long because a few days later I couldn't find my house keys in the usual place. Panic broke out immediately, so I went to my sister-in-law's apartment to get them in. After the incident, I stopped inviting her over every time she wanted to visit, and I would make excuses to keep her away from the house. She gave me her address and invited me to tea during one of our early conversations. I was unable to go because I was sick, but I knew where to go. So as soon as my husband got home, I got in my car and drove to her house. When I knocked on the door, a man answered, and I asked if I could speak with my sister-in-law. He politely told me that no one by her name lived there. I explained that she had given me this address and even showed him her picture, and he looked at it and said that my sister-in-law did not reside there. My husband immediately realized that something was amiss, and he has been trying to ask me what's going on for the past 2 days, but I don't know how to explain it to him because I don't want him to be disappointed. I casually messaged her and asked for her address again, and she replied with the same address as before. By this point, I was completely panicked. I came home trying to act normal, but I could tell I was nervous. I read what you said, and I agree that I was incredibly foolish to keep things from my husband. I should have told him about it anyhow. I understand why some of you are calling me the bad guy in this situation, but I kept wondering if it was my fault for starting the entire conversation with my sister-in-law. If I hadn't done it, I wouldn't have lost the keys in this way. I really wanted to help. When my husband got home from work, I told him I had something to discuss with him. He seemed relieved when we were both at ease, so I told him everything. I also understand those who think I am not entirely to blame, so whatever happens, I'll do the right thing tonight and tell him everything. Don't worry, I'll keep you updated anyway. I appreciate you being honest and pointing out my mistakes. I told him that I could mend the family by staying in contact with her and gradually reintroducing her and his parents into his life after our honeymoon. I didn't mean to offend him or conceal anything, but I was afraid he would stop me from taking action because he was always refusing to tell me what was wrong with his family. so I chose to try to mend the relationship myself. He listened to me without interjecting, and when I was done, my husband expressed his disappointment. He said that I should have asked him what was wrong and that he would have told me everything now that we are married. He also said that he didn't feel comfortable telling me before we were married because he didn't know when his family would try to turn my heart against him. When I told him that I couldn't follow, he gave me all the facts. My father-in-law is an extremely egotistical and abusive man who has always been this way about himself. My sister-in-law inherited this trait from him. She is a charming and narcissistic woman who seems to be a very sincere and sympathetic person, but in reality, she is selfish. My husband realized the dangerous environment as soon as he was old enough to see it, and both my mother-in-law and father-in-law refused to get a divorce because they did not want to deal with the hassle of going to court when my sister-in-law's behavior got her into trouble at school. Made things worse by giving her more freedom over time. When my sister-in-law started college, she got into a heated argument with my mother-in-law and father-in-law who were paying for her tuition. But she wasn't happy because they were also saving money for my husband's education instead of giving it all to her as pocket money. At first, my father-in-law and mother-in-law wouldn't give my sister-in-law any more money because she already had a lot, but my sister-in-law pointed out that my husband could just work his way through university like my father-in-law had done, especially since he was somebody. She said that she was too weak to do this on her own. As a result, my husband's education fund started to decline, but he was unaware of this. All he knew was that there was money set aside for him. When it came time for admissions, he discovered the truth when my sister-in-law encouraged him to simply work his way through college. My husband decided to cut off all communication with them when he moved out at the age of 19, but by the time he was 23, the decision had been made permanently. All of this made me realize how foolish it was for me to invite my sister-in-law into our home. He also claimed that his mother had called him numerous times over the years to request money, even though my sister-in-law seemed to be wealthy, which he later learned from their relative. When I realized what had happened with the lost keys, my spouse immediately told me to call a locksmith and have the locks changed as soon as possible because he was worried about when or if my sister-in-law would try to enter our home. I immediately disabled my sister-in-law's contact information and social media sites to prevent her from using drugs, even though she didn't seem to have a drug problem. Getting in touch with me, we had the locks changed, and as I mentioned in my earlier report, I felt much better after that. However, because of changes in my job duties, I had to go back to work on Wednesdays and Fridays. One Friday, I came home to find my spouse already there. It turned out that our neighbor, a kind elderly woman, was outside in her garden when she saw a suspicious young woman trying to enter our house. The woman's description was exactly like my sister-in-law. The neighbor called, but although my goal was to help my husband, I now realized that my actions were presumptuous. If you care so much about your husband's well-being, why don't you tell him everything instead of keeping things from him? I'm sure it would upset him more to discover that you were keeping things from him than to face charges. Police officers caught her, and my husband has decided not to press charges, but he will apply for a restraining order to protect our safety. Discover that you were speaking improperly to his sister AITA, but only because you are conceited and deliberately disregard your husband's request to fulfill your own, and you are keeping everything from him. He would rather not talk to his family, so why can't you accept that? Now think about a different scenario. In late October, my wife Karen, 78, and I, 71, depart for Florida and spend the summer in Connecticut with our daughter Kara and her husband Sean. Although I am not a contractor or carpenter, I am skilled in home repairs, and I offered to help with the installation of new kitchen floors that my stepson gave Kara and Sean in September. Their home is almost a century old, and I was only going to lay the floors, but during the demolition, I convinced them to remove a few cabinets so that the flooring could be installed correctly. I agreed to assist with prep work on the weekends and returned from Kara, and Sean agreed to build and install the new cabinets in November because they are new homeowners and are not very handy, but they were eager to get started. However, as we got started, we found that the walls were covered in decomposing horsehair plaster, which was an unpleasant surprise. By the end of the weekend, only 10% of the floors had been installed, the kitchen was messy, and there was no stove hookup. I told them to plaster the walls over the course of the week, and I would be back. Kara and Sean called in a panic the following weekend, saying the plaster was a disaster. Carrera was concerned about the weight of her pregnancy, So I asked them to wait. Kara, however, told me she felt duped that the project had gone out of control and that she wanted me to take responsibility for my part in the problems, not financially, but that they had decided to demo the cabinets and that it wasn't my house. Eventually, they paid me for this, my services, and hired a contractor who said I couldn't commit to a project of this size, especially since I work full-time and help my stepson with his house flip. They asked if I would return to help after leaving for Florida, and Kara was uncomfortable working while pregnant. I disagreed with their assessment, but I was heartbroken when they laid me off. Since then, things have gotten strange, and even though I occasionally get updates, I haven't gotten in touch with them to ask about the kitchen or the baby. Karen has repeatedly inquired about the baby. Recently, she contacted us to say that the situation has been terrible, that they had to get licenses from the town, and that they haven't had a stove or sink in months. Kara says that since I haven't checked in and taken charge of the situation, I don't care about her health or our grandchild. I laughed and told her that I would have finished it by now. She texted Karen and me to tell us not to talk to her and to express her to our chagrin. Karen then declined Kara's baby shower in January and called off our visit without telling them. Sean then got in touch with us to ask us to change our minds, saying that they would only become first-time parents when Kara was 6, 5 months pregnant, and didn't mean what she said. He even offered to cover the cost of our visitation tickets. Karen and I, on the other hand, have remained steadfast in our resolve, and we suggest that they give us plenty of notice so that we can come in. Carrara is devastated in March, either before or after the baby is born, but Karen and I were only attempting to accommodate her requests. Now, I'm not sure if I am the AITA in many ways. First, you stated that you are not a carpenter or contractor, but you are good at house maintenance. You encouraged them to tear down their kitchen, but you only finished 10% of the flooring before you left. Carrara has every right to be upset, and her feelings are legitimate, because you made a mess of their place and then backed down, essentially saying, "Oh well, that's not my problem, and I wouldn't want anything to do with you. But they invited you to their baby shower, so go ahead and apologize." Now, let's look at a different scenario. My husband and I work hard to raise our 3 children and help them grow up to be successful adults, and I am proud of all 3 of them. They were all amazing kids who, if I may say so myself, became decent adults when my oldest daughter married a widower with a 2-year-old. My husband and I set up an education fund for that child, just like we did for all of our biological grandchildren. We know a little bit about compound interest investing, so by starting early, we can invest a small amount each month, giving them enough money to start their lives. My oldest grandchild just graduated from high school, and after deducting scholarships and other costs, we were able to tell them they would graduate debt-free because we pay for their tuition and other expenses instead of giving them money directly. We learned this lesson from our youngest child, our only son, whom we gave the money to directly, just like we had done with his 2 older sisters. He also received scholarships, but he spent them and ultimately chose to become a tradesman. Today, he is doing well and has a great business. My son was previously married, but it did not work out. He has 2 children from that marriage last year. He married a beautiful woman who had a 15-year-old son, and neither of them came to the wedding. After some discussion, my husband and I decided that we could afford to donate $5,000 to help with his stepson's education, but my son was very disappointed because he knows that all of our other grandchildren have enough money in their accounts to cover both of their expenses, 2 or more. Although my son earns a respectable living, he spends it on toys and vacations. I don't think he or my daughter-in-law had saved any money for the stepson's school, so we donated $5,000 from my personal fund to replace my car. My son and his wife are preparing for the stepson's graduation in June, but they still gripe about how I treat him. My son's lack of funds to pay for the stepson's education is a result of his premarital spending habits. I hope this is clear now. I have discussed this with my husband and kids, and my son wants me to transfer funds from all of the accounts we've opened for his biological children and open them for him. I know we're treating him differently from my other grandchildren, but we didn't have nearly 2 decades to save for him. We offered to divide the 2 accounts we already had for his biological children into 3, including the $5,000, and we also agreed to keep making contributions to these accounts until they were exhausted. My child seems unhappy with that choice, but we did not have the same 15-year head start on saving for this grandson as we did for the previous ones. He may be disappointed that his stepson will not have the same head start, but he cannot ignore it. Thank you for watching, and if you haven't subscribed yet, Please do so and click the notification bell to stay up to speed on more shocking real-life tales happening in your area. Don't be upset with us because we can't offer more at this time. It's up to him to support his family. Ask Reddit.